Essentially, we were outnumbered 7-1 or 8-1, which is not a good number.
The amount of gunfire that was coming in was not normal. There was a lot more explosions happening. It just sounded like 100 machine guns pouring into the COP that morning.
You know, we land on the ground and you look up and you're surrounded by mountains, and everybody's initial response is, "What the fuck are we doing here?" The location that we were in was a fishbowl. The position we were in was later described as tactically indefensible. I think that location cannot be summarized more truthfully than that statement, a tactically indefensible position.
So my name is Tom Rasmussen. I was a sergeant in the U.S. Army. I was in 3rd Squadron, 61st Cavalry Regiment. We were Arista Squadron, which is smaller unit type scout unit. Our MTO, which our MTO is how many people are in each platoon, each troop, so on and so forth, is a lot smaller than most. We're a third of the size of a normal infantry unit. There was something about our unit, especially our platoon, where everybody was just real tight. We were really good friends with each other. There was a rank structure, but everybody was also best friends. And we respected the rank structure, but we also were as close as you can get to another human being.
My name is Armando Avalos Jr., and the unit I was attached to was Bravo Troop 361. So my time with Bravo and 1st Platoon is a little different from the rest of the guys you probably talked to already, because they're scouts, so I was an attachment to these guys. I was sort of an outsider coming in again and having to find my way into this platoon. So I always carried a chip on my shoulder because I always had to be at least up there with the leaders of the platoon for them to have any trust into me and my ability to do my job. But once I found my niche with the guys and got in, and it was just like a little fraternity club. It literally was just hanging out, getting ambushed and running out with your friends, and returning fire and coming back and just bullshitting the rest of the day. I know a lot gets said about the negative side of war, but there's also a positive side of war where we developed this bond that today we still have.
So my name is Chris Cordova. I served as the medical officer for Combat Outpost Keating on October 3rd of 2009. I was the senior medical advisor to the squadron commander and overall responsible for the medical care at Combat Outpost Keating. Yeah, so my sole focus at COP Keating was to provide health care, so primary care for sprained ankles, sore throats, illnesses that would pop up, and then my most important mission there was saving lives of soldiers who were injured.
My name is Brad Larson. I'm with the Nebraska National Guard right now. My first flight into COP Keating came in on a Chinook in the middle of the night. It was pitch black, landed on an LZ, got off the Chinook with nods on, looked around, and all I saw was mountains and cliffs everywhere.
My name is First Sergeant Harder. I'm from Minnesota. I'm currently the First Sergeant of Bravo Troop 213 Cav. So the COP, it didn't take much to realize this is a horrible spot to be. It's beautiful, but it's horrible. And I saw it for the first time in daylight and I couldn't believe it. And then I think we went to normal business right after that.
Our day-to-day routine was, it's so funny. It goes from 0 to 100. Just sitting around watching The Office or playing Risk, and then boom, RPGs come in, and it's just you're wired up, spun up, ready to go. A lot of workout time, a lot of goofing off with the guys, which is fun. You kind of have to do that when you're in that environment. Try to keep spirits alive, and so a lot of pranks. I mean, I wasn't involved with directly with the goat and Bundy's in his bunk, but that one was pretty good. I think that one probably took the cake.
We're gonna go throw in the LT's room. What the fuck?
And I hate to say it was all fun and games, because it wasn't. But there's a lot of downtime, and so during the boredom, you would kind of come up with different ways to entertain yourself.
Normally at COP Keating, we would do patrols. We would try to talk to the locals, looking for signs of the enemy. We did meetings with the elders, what resources they needed, what we could help them with, whether it was drinking water or electricity, schools for the kids.
So the enemy in that location, they've been fighting wars their whole time, you know, since birth. They were fighting Russians, they were doing everything that we're doing.
They were good. They were really good at what they did. They were trained. The Taliban doesn't care about dying. Their entire goal is to be a martyr for their religion. The terrain there is just so nasty. Everything's straight up, everything's jagged rocks, boulders the size of cars that people can hide behind. It's extremely an intimidating environment. When you live in that, it's like it's your own backyard. You know what I mean? If I'm hunting in my backyard, I know every trail, I know where the deer are coming and going, and the Taliban are no different in Afghanistan. They know all the trails, they know all the goat paths, they know all the easy infills, exfills. They know how to shoot at you a couple times and then just roll out, and you'll never see them.
So all started at 6 a.m. And it was like just like any other day.
I woke up a little before daylight. I was going to relieve Mace on LRES 2 on the gun truck. I went out there, took my helmet off, set it on the Humvee, had to take my morning piss. Little pecker hanging out to the wind. Little did I know that there was enemy snipers and hundreds of enemy that were eyeing me that should have taken me out right then, but they had to wait for their signal.
I was actually on guard duty from midnight to 03 at LRAS 2, which Sergeant Larson was my relief and came out to relieve me at 3 o'clock. So I just remember getting off shift, just like any other soldier gets off shift, they go relieve themselves, unwind, go BS, write a letter, emails, get on the internet, whatnot. But I just remember my last conversation with Gallegos before I bedded down for the night. It was just about how shitty everything was at the moment and how we just needed a little bit more time and everything would be better, better situation for all of us.
The boom, initial boom, explosion obviously was not so different than initially in previous, incoming fire that we had taken. But within seconds, that initial explosion was accompanied by multiple explosions and then gunfire. And so initially, within seconds, we knew that this was not the same attack that had happened before. This was something that they had been planning, and this was a big one, and it was evident right off the bat.
Initially opened the door, it wasn't the same. The smell of all the guns firing, the explosions in the background, they came fast and they came hard with an intensity that we weren't quite used to.
The amount of gunfire that was coming in was not normal. There was a lot more explosions happening. So as I'm getting up, I'm looking at Clint Romachet and Brad Larson, and I'm throwing my kit on, and we're having like a non-verbal communication where we're like looking at each other like, fuck, we're gonna have to fight today. Like, they're here to play today, you know what I mean? So it was extremely intense, just and intimidating before you even got into the fight.
So as soon as those explosions happened, I jumped out. Shane Corville and I, were ready. He looked at me, I looked at him. I think our communication through our looks were like, oh shit, shit's going down. We got to be ready for this.
Remember, like the first round came in think from a recoilless rifle or maybe a rocket. I don't really remember, but it was a big boom, and that's what woke me up. But at this point, like I said, you get numb to it. Your mind instantly wants to think, oh, not right now. I want to sleep. Like, I'm tired.
10 seconds into it, I knew this was different. I was getting hit with everything. RPGs, sniper fire, machine gun fire. Everything was focused on the western side, was focused on myself and the mortar pit. It was a long time ago, but I figured I had about 10 minutes of my life left in me. They were hitting me really, really hard, and I was hitting back as hard as I could.
So I went ahead and went into our CP office, saw Lieutenant Bunderman, who was also my PL, who was our acting commander that day. And I just remember asking him, what's going on, sir? Where do you need me at? And I just remember Lieutenant Bunderman looking at me, just telling me, just go observe, Avil, just go observe. And I could tell that he was a little overwhelmed with what was going on in the beginning stages, so I proceeded to go out of our CP. By the time I opened up the front door, another recoilless rifle rocket came in and impacted our barracks roofing top, which caused a backblast leading into our CP door, which tossed me back.
So my initial job, and everybody's duties change from day to day. So my job that day was to get up and go to what we call a stand to position. A stand to position is a guard position that's only manned during peak fighting hours. You know what I mean? So if you're thinking in like hunting terms, you know, deer move in the morning and in the evening. Well, the Taliban and most people attack first thing in the morning or right before dark. So we would have extra guards in place during stand 2 hours. Well, when we actually would get hit, we would reinforce those positions, and everybody has an assigned position to go to. So our guard towers weren't necessarily guard towers, they were 11-14s, which is an up-armored Humvee. So each one had either a 50 cal on it or a Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher. So that day, my job was to run to stand 2-2 and provide ammo for Specialist Faulkner and his 50 cal. And while he's engaging targets, I'm calling him out for him, and I'm linking belts of 50 cal together for him to keep his gun running.
I had about 1,000 rounds, 50 cal, loaded in the can. Once I extinguished that, I reloaded multiple times, which I don't know how I didn't get shot doing that. I knew help was coming. The battle drills that we had done, I knew some friends were coming to help me. So after 1,500 rounds of 50 cal, as hard as that thing would cycle, an RPG finally hit my 50 cal and knocked it out of the turret. I didn't know it was going to be another 12 hours before that fight would be over.
So all the ammo was centrally located, all the excess ammo was centrally located in a bunker. So when we got to the bunker, there's a couple different spots where you had to run through the open. Now there's no way to cover concealed movement to that spot. You point, shoot, run, and get to that point as fast as you can. So you're completely exposed. Anyone on top of the hills is literally probably looking down at you, watching you sprint all the way across this open area. Just a couple times, you don't even know what to do. But you're not gonna stop, you're gonna keep moving. You don't want to be a target, at least not be an easy target.
So after the 50 got knocked out of my hand, relief was coming. Mace had showed up to help support with ammo, but my gun was down. Gallegos had showed up. Sergeant Martin had showed up. Everybody had come to help get in the fight. And then Carter ended up showing up with more ammo, but we didn't have a workable weapon system. So at that point, we heard over the radio that Charlie was in the wire.
Enemy in the wire, enemy in the wire, everybody fall back.
And we could see an enemy fighter climb over the wall right in front of us as we were sitting in the Humvee. And that's when we came up with a hasty plan we were gonna bound back to what we call the Alamo position. I was in the driver's seat, Carter was right behind me, Gallegos was in the truck commander's seat, essentially riding shotgun. And again, this Humvee will not move. And we knew we had to move because it was just a matter of time until they got one through that killed us all. It was at that point we were going to bound back to the Shura building, to the Alamo position. As soon as we said 1, 2, 3, go, here we go, they bounded, we exited, started hammering with the M4. That's when I took one to the helmet, came through about 1/4 of an inch, didn't hit me in the head. RPGs started hitting, machine guns opened fire, and that's when Mace got hit with an RPG, took out his legs. Gallegos went down. Didn't see where Martin went. He ended up going over a big rock. That's when Carter and I got back into the Humvee because the enemy fire again was overwhelming, and guys were dropping. Guys were getting hit by the enemy.
I think hearing the radio talk in the operations center too, and hearing Gallegos' voice and the desperation of him needing ammo and the overwhelming fire that he had at his location, it made me pucker my butthole up and just hit that door and go do what I was trained to do and what my platoon expects me to do. From here, my radio went down. I was sending the grids back into the operations center, but I lost the feel on my radio, just like, every war movie that you see. For some reason, a weapon's either gonna get jammed, even no matter how much you clean it, or your radio loses its feel. So I had to end up running back and forth from the aid station to the operations center.
And the aid station was small. We're talking about a room that's 25 by 25 feet. Pretty small area, but that's what we had, and that's what we had to work with. And I remember grabbing the radio, and my hand was just tremoring. I couldn't hold it still, and Jeff Hobbs kind of looked at me. Jeff, great guy, not a very emotional dude. He's pretty dry, pretty vanilla. He kind of looks at me and says, "Hey Doc, I'm pretty scared." And just his tone, and he could see my hand just tremoring while I'm holding the radio. And I looked at him, I'm like, "Yeah, I'm pretty fucking scared too."
So after that, that's when Clint had gone to the headquarters building and talked with Lieutenant Bunderman and Sergeant Hill about a plan to push back out and attempt to go recover our wounded, go recover our KIA, and take our COP back. Because if we kept doing what we were doing, we were gonna die. We had no air cover at this time. We had no artillery support. We were all by ourselves with 300 Taliban just imposing their will on us.
Carter and I were pinned in the Humvee for what seemed like a couple days. It was a few hours. At one point, the Apaches had showed up.
So once air support checks on station, it gives you a whole new power. That's the one thing the U.S. military has always had, is air superiority. It's kind of like your dad coming in, you know what I mean, when you're having a tough time in a ball game and like reassuring you, like it's gonna be okay, you know what I mean? So once air support checked on station, it gave us more room to breathe, and we sat back a little bit and just let those Apaches do what they needed to do, engage targets. So we used the air support, the bombing runs, and the Apache gun runs as covering fire to get Brad Larson, Mace, and Carter back to the aid station, because at this point we knew Stephen Mace was gravely wounded and wasn't going to make it much longer, so we had to get him back right now.
I could still hear pretty good gunfights going on. We were just isolated and had no heavy weapon system. Anytime we tried to engage the enemy, sniper fire would come through our windows. It was about that point when Carter was in the truck commander's seat and he saw Mace moving. So we devised a plan to get Mace and get him back into the Humvee. Carter went down, grabbed him, I covered, we put him in the Humvee, tried to address his wounds as best we could. His legs were essentially gone and his abdomen was completely shredded open. All he wanted was a cigarette. Carter, being on the right side, exited the Humvee, went down to check on Gallegos. He was KIA, but he did have a radio, an ICOM radio. So Carter brought that back. I called up any station, this is the Red Dragon. I got a response, told him Mace was really bad, needed attention. I talked to, I believe, Bunderman on the radio, who said, if I give you some support, do you think you can get Mace to the aid station? I said, absolutely. He said, when you hear the big boom, get him on a stretcher. We had stretchers set up right next to us already, just for this. Heard the boom, felt the boom, biggest boom I've ever felt in my life. Exited the vehicle, told Mace, I said, hang on, this is gonna hurt like a motherfucker. Put his weapon beside him, we picked him up, headed towards the aid station, saw Griffin laying on our path, dropped Mace off, gave him to Cordova, and they immediately, the medics started working on him. He was priority number one at that point.
At that point, Mace had been injured since 6 a.m., so he'd been injured for 6 hours. Every time you look at a patient, you have an initial assessment, your initial clinical impression, and clinical impression of him at first didn't look favorable. He was very pale, not coherent in his words, so we kind of assessed, alert and oriented. He was not alert and oriented. He was not getting blood flow to his brain because he had lost so much blood. 2:30, 3 o'clock. I know we're not getting a medevac helicopter in anytime soon. Clearly he had lost blood. Clearly he needed blood. And so we need to figure out a way to deliver blood. And so that's when Shane, Cody, Jeff, and I kind of huddled and was like, hey, this is what we need. This is what we need to do. Mace's dog tag was A positive. There were three of us, three of the four of us were A positive, myself, Cody Floyd, Jeff Hobbs. And so we had a hell of a time getting IV access for Mace. He had lost so much blood that all of his veins were collapsed. The one venous cut down that we did, that one had gotten pulled out and we just could not find any veins that were stickable. Like if you lose so much blood, all of his blood flow had been shunted from his extremities to his vital organs. That's the natural body kind of preservation method, is when you're in shock, all the blood stays in your core, and so you can't get IV access because there's no blood anywhere else. And so the external jugular vein is an option. It's not your first option, but in that situation, that extreme situation, we elected to pursue that, and Jeff Hobbs was successful at getting IV access to his external jugular vein. So now we had access to administer the whole blood that we had withdrew from Cody, and we hooked the IV tubing up to the catheter, hung the bag, and watched and waited, and scared and didn't know if we were going to cause further harm or if he was going to respond well. We didn't know. In about probably 15-20 minutes after kind of the bag had gone through, it sounds miraculous, he really started to perk up. Mace would start speaking. He was speaking words. He could put together sentences. He was complaining of pain. He wanted to smoke a cigarette. On a shitty day, kind of the worst day you could ever experience, it was kind of a light of hope, and like, man, we're one, we're gonna make it out of here, and then two, we think I think Mace is gonna make it.
Part of Romashay's plan involved recovering the fallen that he apparently already knew that we lost because his direct ties with the operations center. And I knew that moment that was gonna be my role for that day, was to go retrieve the fallen. When I gathered my team, we stacked up and was just waiting for Romashay's call to actually start my part of the counteroffensive, which to go retrieve Geigels' Martin's body. Once I find out where he's directing me towards, I take off to where Geigels is located, which is another about 30 yards away. Me believing that he was still alive just because of the way his body was. So I had a lot of encouragement, I guess, to make the dash, because I was under the impression that he was still returning fire. Everything was laid out like he was returning fire off a machine gun. But when I walked up to him and actually placed my hand on his shoulder, I think that was a realization that, he's not there no more.
9 p.m. that night, we had enough security in place, and medevac helicopters started to come in to evacuate the wounded and also retrieve the fallen soldiers from that day. So we put Mace on the helicopter sent him with a bag. I donated a bag of blood at this point myself. 2 other soldiers donated a bag of blood. I think 5 total bags of blood were donated directly from soldiers, and we sent him with one on the medevac helicopter. And they, Mace, you made it, bro. You're gonna make it out of here. And fast forward a few hours later on, ran into First Sergeant Burton. I was like, hey man, how's Mace doing? My mind is like, hey, he's doing great. I just want to update, a positive update. And he kind of looked at me with a little head nod, and I was like, defeated, absolutely defeated. That he did make it. And that hurt. Yeah.
I think the guys that didn't make it back are the ones that need to be spoken about the most. 14 years later, all these guys would have been in their 30s now, and the sacrifices they made. They left behind wives, they left behind children. Their whole entire life was ahead of them, right? Their story wasn't over, and it was cut short, unfortunately. So at least what we can do is just by honor them and telling their story of the heroic things they did and the ones they left behind. Like a guy like Faulkner who, came home after he was wounded and was battling those demons, and eventually he was susceptible to his own thoughts and his demons that he had, and it was shortly after the rest of the unit had gotten back, he had passed from an overdose, right? Because he wasn't coping with it right. I don't know what was actually happening, but I know it was a contributing factor, because he did say he was having a rough time. Him and Griffin and Scusa went to Iraq together, so they already had that bond from all their previous deployment, and then go back to this and lose 2 of them. It was probably a pretty hard toll on him. But even telling his story, so I think that's the only way you can ever do it justice.
So Romachet and Carter both received the Medal of Honor. I don't even know how many Purple Hearts handed out to guys that were wounded, but the guys that don't get recognized, I don't think enough, Colonel Cordova as the medic, the head medic, Shane Corville Hobbs, the medics, the Armando Avalos, the unsung heroes, the guys that don't get recognition. I would like to recognize them. They were the guys that don't want recognized and should be recognized.